Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Prosperity Through Multifamily Real Estate Investing podcast. I'm your host, Cody Laughlin, hashtag real estate Cody. And joining me, as always, is my co-host. We're going to go with hashtag Brian this morning. What's up, buddy?
What's up, Cody? I love how you're gonna muck every ounce of it, aren't you, man?
It's going on every one of my every one of my platforms is going everywhere. But I tell you what, we're going to take a poll for you, though, man. Every venue that we do, we're going to have to take a poll and get a nickname for you. That's my objective for you.
Let's do it.
I'm not going to let it die. So, well, awesome, Brian. Well, tell us who we're working with today.
All right. Today we have Mr. Chris Miles, the cash flow expert and the anti-financial advisor. He's a leading authority teaching entrepreneurs and professionals how to get their money working for them today. He's an author, podcast host of the Chris Miles Money Show, and has been featured in U.S. News, CNN Money, Entrepreneur on Fire, and has a proven reputation with his company, Money Ripples, which you can visit at www.moneyripples.com, getting his clients fast financial results. In fact, his personal clients have increased their cash flow by over $250 million in the last 11 years. Super excited to have you. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Hey, it's such a pleasure to be here. Thanks, Brian. And good to see you too, Cody.
You as well, man. You as well. Really excited. And man, really love your story and your background. So tell the listener, a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I started out doing the same thing that a lot of people do, going to college, having hopes and dreams of, working for the man, right? And started out that path. But I realized as I got down the college path, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to control my own destiny, my freedom, and that sort of thing. So what ended up happening is I was going to become a business consultant, right? I was going to be kind of a more freelancer. Well, I figured if I'm going to be a business consultant, shouldn't I have real life business experience and not just be some guy graduating with a degree and having zero experience in business, right? So right before I was going to get my bachelor's, I dropped out of college to become an entrepreneur. And I was trying to find the right thing. The first thing that came along was becoming a financial advisor. Now, I didn't realize it was really easy to become a financial advisor. I thought it was like something you had to interview the crap for, right? And I felt intimidated because I'm like, well, I took a couple of finance classes in high school or college, but that doesn't mean anything, right? So I'm like trying to impress them and everything, only now realizing that they just needed somebody with a heartbeat that could pass a couple tests. And that's all they cared about, right? They wanted salesmen in suits. And, but anyways, I did that path and became an entrepreneur. And I said, I like this. So I stayed dropped out of college. I had one course to go to get my bachelor's. I stayed dropped out, decided not to finish that sociology degree, right? And, oh, by the way, it was a sociology major with a triple minor in psychology, Japanese, and ballroom dancing. So as little known fact, I was one of the nation's top amateur ballroom dancers about 20 years ago. So anyways, so I was going down that path, but I decided to go down the entrepreneur path instead. And I did that for 4 years as a financial advisor. And I was telling everybody what to do with their money. I was broke as heck, but I was telling everybody what they should be doing, right? And about 4 years in, and not even that long, actually, probably about 3 to 4 years in, I realized there were some weaknesses with what was being taught, right? But again, your pocketbook's tied to it. You kind of want to turn a blind eye to it, right? But again, I'm a guy that likes evidence. I like to see that things really work. And I saw that people that had decades of advice, people that had been taking this advice still weren't much better off financially than people that weren't taking their advice. And this, of course, I got into business right at around Y2K. So a great time to become a financial advisor, right? So anyways, so I'm realizing that the numbers aren't working. Well, finally, about 4 years in, one of the guys I trained to be a financial advisor left. He quit to go do real estate investing with his dad, right? And I called him 4 months later to wish him Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. This is right before 2006 started. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to call, see how he's doing, and then, find out he's basically broke. So then he'll come back to me, right? That was my secret intention of, calling him just to find out what's going on in his life. Well, find out, he said, man, life is great. My dad and I, we've doubled his income from being a professor at the local university. I was like, come on, 4 months? That's too good to be true, right? Like that whole stuff you hear. And he's like, no, man, this is really working. And so we got us a little debate, right? Because I'm like, this can't be real. So I'm telling him that stocks are better. He's telling me real estate's better. We're going back and forth about what's better. And finally he stops and he says, Chris, how many of your clients are actually financially free right now where they don't worry about money? And I thought about it. I'm like, well, even those retired doctors still watch CNN. If you watch CNN, you worry about everything. So no, nobody's free. They're all basically worried about money. He said, well, good job. Way to go, Chris. How about this? How many of you guys as financial advisors are financially free, not off the commissions, but actually doing the investments you've been recommending? Because if anybody has it figured out, it should be you guys. And I thought about it, like, well, maybe one guy is that I know of. And I found out that guy wasn't either. He was all, as they say in Texas, right? All hat and no cattle, you know? And so, I mean, basically he was broke as well. He said, well, that's my point. He's like, if it hasn't worked for you guys and it hasn't worked for your clients, why are you teaching this stuff? And I'm like, okay, now he's got me, you know? And so I said, all right, well, tell me the answer. He's like, I'm not going to tell you the answer because I don't think you'll believe me anyways, because you just got done arguing with me for the last 10 minutes. And I'm like, well, okay, you got me now. Give me the answer, you know? So he said, all right, if you're really serious about this, go get the book by Robert Kiyosaki called Who Took My Money, which says why, mutual funds stink. That's basically the premise of the book, right? And he's like, and then, we'll go listen to this radio show. It was an AM talk show before podcasts were coming out, right? Go listen to this AM radio show with these two real estate investors. And so I did. And for the next few months, I started studying up on this stuff and realizing, okay, I can't do this anymore. So March of 06, I quit being a financial advisor. I said, I will never go back to teach about money again. I was a charlatan, basically, without even knowing it, unintentionally, right? But I just felt horrible because I deceived people without even knowing. I just bought into the whole crappy system of financial advising, which is what all financial experts are teaching you right now. And so I was like, I can't do it anymore. I will just, I'll go be a mortgage broker because it's 2006. Everybody was a mortgage broker, right? Like everybody was a realtor. And then I'll go teach ballroom dancing on the side. And that's what I did for a little while until I realized, okay, these guys, like they know stuff that I don't know because there's these real estate investors, right? This group of guys here locally in Utah. I said, I got to figure this out. So I started learning what they knew. And a matter of months later, just later that summer, I was able to be financially independent myself, and so I was like, crap, I'm 28 years old, financially independent. What do I do with my life? And so anyways, I mean, that kind of led me down the path of, 2007 coming out of retirement to teach this kind of stuff. And granted, now we could get into this. I mean, I went through ups and downs. Like I actually got hosed during the recession. I went from millionaire to upside down millionaire, had to claw my way back out to the point where in 2016, I was financially independent for the second time. I don't recommend it. If you do it twice, it's not usually a good thing, right? So I was able to do it the second time, much wiser, much better time around by the time I was 39. And here I am today teaching the same stuff, semi-retired, but, host on my own podcast show and consulting clients to get out of the rat race and even teaching stuff about infinite banking and things like that. So.
I love it. I love it, Chris. It's great. And you're absolutely right. I think the system is designed to keep us down this one pipeline, right? With this one set of blinders on. And it's like when you take those off and you realize, holy smokes, everything I've been taught was wrong. It's an eye-opening moment. And it takes a lot to get people to shift the mindset and understand the difference. But, like you said, I mean, you can go back and look at these circumstances. And I referenced my start in 2008, my W-2 career, right in the heart of the Great Recession, where I was watching people that were working 30, 40 years ready to retire, and they couldn't. They were terrified because they're like, all of a sudden they're like, oh crap, all of my retirement assets are gone in a matter of just, brief 12, 24 months. And that was kind of the light bulb for me. It was like, wait a minute, that doesn't really make sense. But you're absolutely right. I mean, what do? They teach you to go to school, you get a job, you get a good degree, and then you go and you put on the hat, and then you try to coach people how to do the same thing. And at the end of the day, we're all in the same rat race. So
that's right.
So that's really exciting, man. And I want to kind of go back and really talk about you mentioned that you're now twice financially independent, and you went through the Great Recession and you learned some lessons to that. Let's start there. I want to kind of talk about what was that experience like? I mean, you found your success, you're probably, I would imagine, feeling pretty good about life, and then, things happen. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so, I mean, like I said, like 2007, I partnered up with some of these guys and we were all kind of like out of the rat race ourselves, right? Some were, doing more gambling type stuff than I was, a bad thing that happened during that time is that it was that Midas touch, right? It seemed like in 2006 and 2007, everything you touched turned to gold, So it's like you couldn't fail. And if you're not careful, pride can creep in. You can get careless, you can get sloppy. And I'm seeing this happen even today, right? Like the same signs are on the wall right now. I mean, you guys know you're in multifamily. I mean, there's people in multifamily I think have no business being in multifamily right now, doing stuff. And it's like, okay, well, eventually, when the tide rolls out, you see you swimming naked, as Warren Buffett says, right? And And that's kind of what happened there is, and I did a few mistakes. So for example, number one, mistake I did is with these partners, they knew I was doing these other things for multiple streams of income, which of course they were too, but mine was more like in the business side of things, right? So I had I call it residual streams when it comes from business, where it's more passive from there. And I call it just passive income from like, real estate and from other investments, right? Well, they were doing more stuff with just their money to kick off. I was doing more residual income streams. And granted, I was like taking a couple hours a week to manage it to keep me out of the rat race. Well, they're like, hey, cut those streams off. You should be focused on all in with this. So mistake number one, I cut off my streams of income. And this is key because I've seen this happen already. I mean, I'm in a high level mastermind group with a bunch of real estate investors, especially like wholesalers and flippers and people like that. And it's so common to see these guys making millions and millions of dollars, but they're all actively, making this money, right? It's not passive income that's coming in. It's all active. It's like they aren't transactionally doing stuff. If they aren't flipping a house, if they aren't, wholesaling, if they aren't doing these transactions, which is basically like very active income. If they weren't doing that or something shut off that valve, they would be hosed, right? They would be in massive, massive trouble. So that's why I always recommend people is like, hey, always have passive streams of income. Even if you make crazy amounts of money in your active form of business, that's great. That's your economic engine. Focus there too, but always create passive streams of income as well. So the mistake I made is I cut those off to try to be a team player and all that kind of stuff. Well, the next thing I know, of course, is when our business starts hitting the fan a little bit because we were focusing on real estate investors. That's who we were working with, right? And then all of a sudden, real estate market goes, just gets slammed down on them. They don't have money. They're not paying us. And pretty soon, like now we've got all these bills in the business. We've got, of course, my own personal lifestyle, everything else that built up, from that period of time as well. Now I'm like in the hole $16,000 a month. That's how much I'm short. So I got to find out a way to make up that gap or basically, crawl under a hole and pee all over myself, because it was a pretty stressful time. And that's pretty much what I was going through for a good year and a half to 2 years, was just trying to figure that out. I stopped telling people how to get out of the rat race at that time because when I was back in it, I was like, well, I can't teach people how to do that. Like that would be completely out of integrity. So I switched it up. I started instead focusing my business more on teach people how to get resourceful because that's what I was doing. I was trying to find money, right? And most people were saying that during the recession. A lot of the questions started shifting from getting out of the rat race to, hey, if I could just, be paycheck to paycheck right now, that'd be awesome. And so I started switching my message to be more of, okay, let's pivot over to how can you be resourceful? And I wouldn't tell them at the time that, I was in the hole big time and I was getting creative and stuff. I was telling them, basically they would ask me, well, Chris, I would pay you if I could find the money. So my answer was, well, I bet you I could find the money. I didn't want to tell them that's because your situation is better than mine. I know I can find it. You got hope, So I would tell them, great, I'll find the money for you. If I find it, will you pay me? And they said, yeah, of course. And so I would do that. I would start finding money. And so I started helping people find and free up cash to do that until, as time went on, about 2015, 2016, I switched back over to getting out of the rat race again because I was getting out of the rat race myself. And so that's the interesting thing. I mean, that's the long and short of it. I mean, there's a lot of emotional crap I had to deal with too, that, I have to wake up every morning saying like, man, I feel like a fraud, how do I do this? Or how do I get out of this, this hole, and I was lucky enough not to file for bankruptcy. Lucky and unlucky at the same time. I probably would have been financially better off if I filed for bankruptcy and wiped the slate clean, but I was just, I'm just stubborn, so I was like, no, I'm going to pay this stuff back, and I did it, but it was painful. It took a long, long time of that active income, trying to build that up and pay off debt and pay off those bills and, minimize the lifestyle. So I wasn't like just trying to blow money. I was just trying to be so focused on getting out of that hole and building up cash so I could get out of the rat race the second time.
Powerful story, man. And I think through that adversity, you really figure out a lot about who you are as a person and as a business owner, right? And I think that's why we really enjoy a lot of these conversations with people like you who've kind of been through some of that turmoil and not to highlight that distress for you, but at the same time, it's like, again, a lot of people, they don't have the fortitude to handle those situations, so, to be able to listen to your story and listen to what you undergone, and have to call and fight your way back out. And then here you are right back, in an even hopefully better spot than what you were before.
Mhm.
You know, it's a really inspiring story. So I appreciate you sharing that, man. That's great. So
Absolutely.
yeah, but I really like what you said about switching the focus to being resourceful. I really want, let's continue that conversation. So talk to a little bit more about, you mentioned like go out there and find money, go out there and find whatever it is. Let's dive into that a little bit more. Tell us a little bit more, you know, tips or tricks on how do we do that?
Yeah. And I put those like fully like on my website, like a free download you can get. It's like on moneyripples.com, you know. But let me give you a few of those and kind of do it almost in the order of my story, because that's the funny thing is that all these tips came from my own situation, but it also helped other clients. Like when you see like in my, you know, my biography where I've helped over, you know, hundreds of clients free up over $250 million in the last 11 years. It's just doing the same crap that I did, you know. So one is really start tracking your money, right? Not just what's going out. I mean, that's important, but also what's coming in. And I talk about there's three mindsets around money, right? There's the spender, which everybody talks about, and they give them a hard time. You know, that of course the spender mindset's in scarcity, right? It's easy come, easy go. They're always trying to scramble to make money, but they kind of ignore what they're spending. The savers are the more subtle scarcity one, because you can never become free becoming a saver. Savers, you can never pay off debt fast enough. You can never save up enough money. It's never enough, right? Because they're always hoarding like little squirrels, you know, hoarding up their little nuts, right? And as they store that up, they're usually asset rich and cash poor is what I find. And that's like the majority of my clients. Like they're guys are like doctors or dentists, people like that. Like, okay, I just saved hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars and I'm not getting paid squat. You know, like I had somebody who literally had $4 million paying them nothing in passive income. They were just trying to stuff in the market, which is gambling. You know, if you're putting in the stock market, it's just ridiculous. And that's the kind of thing that I see. And so, you know, tracking your money is important because as a steward, you look at the money coming in and the money going out. It's really coming from a more abundance perspective. Looking at it not like there's never enough, which is what both those other paradigms look at, but really like the full flow of money and realizing that your job is really to get your money to multiply, to amplify, and get it to ultimately to serve more people, right? That's what a steward does. And so really, I'm training people to look at both directions of the flow: the money coming in, tracking your income, and how to increase that. Look for ways to increase that, and then two, money flowing out. You know, what are destructive expenses that you have, or I call them consumptive, even, right? Like consumptive are okay within reason, but you know, what are these expenses are actually doing for you? And this is good whether you're looking at your business, if you're a business owner, and or you're looking at your personal life. Because are these expenses really creating an ROI for you, right? Are they really enriching your life? Because if they're not, get rid of it, you know? I mean, even I have people that they don't necessarily have expenses, but they have a lot of stuff because they become hoarders, right? Like the extreme of a saver is a hoarder, you know? And sometimes they have so much crap in their life. It's like, get rid of it, clear it out, clean it, you know, throw it away, sell it, donate it to get the tax write-off or whatever, right? But get that stuff out of your life. And I've had people find thousands of dollars doing that too, you know. So it's really about a matter of tracking your money, watching it, you know, on an active basis, not just once a month. I recommend at least twice a month, if not weekly, really watching and being proactive with your money. Great tools to use: business, QuickBooks, of course, is the easy one, right? You can always use QuickBooks because accountants all seem to generally love that. Although there's other programs out there like Xero, like Xero, you know, .com. There's other programs, of course. That's a great one. And then of course, for personal life, I use Mint. You know, you can use whatever you want, right? Whatever helps. But I personally love Mint. It's a free tool. It tracks it just like QuickBooks does. In fact, it's owned by Intuit, the same company. But great, easy way to track your money and make it more time efficient. Because I like easy stuff. I'm ambitiously lazy, you know, so whatever tool I use, I like to do it to where I don't have to work, right? So that's what I use. And it's been great because once I started to watch my money, then I started to realize that's how I knew I was 16,000 the whole each month. Because when I wasn't watching my money, all I knew was that, you know, my savings was dropping rapidly. My credit card balances were going up because I was trying to make up the difference, but I didn't know. And I found out this key thing is that really, it doesn't matter how much money you have. Cash flow is what's really important. You know, it's really how much profit do you have? How much money do you have more coming in than what's going out? Because what I learned is it didn't matter how much was coming in if more was going out, right? It didn't matter what you looked like on the outside if you're struggling and desperate, you know, leading this life of quiet desperation on the inside. And so that's what was happening is I realized I had to really start watching what was going on with my money. And that's when I realized, like, some months I was 14, 15,000 the whole, other months 16,000 plus. So that's one big one right there, is track your money. Business, personal, both is huge.
Chris, this is really powerful stuff. When I hear this stuff, I always ask myself, and I don't know, maybe you have the answer to it. Why is this not taught in school? Right? I mean,
Yeah.
maybe if it was, people like you wouldn't be able to be in business, unfortunately. But
Mhm.
it's, as real estate investors, I know one of the things Cody and I run into sometimes is, we meet, and I'm sure you do too on your clients. We meet some really high earners, high net
Yeah.
worth people, a lot of money, but they don't know what to do with it, right? They
Yeah.
they they sometimes are in extreme amounts of debt without realizing it. And it goes back to little tips like you just mentioned, like just watching your money, how much is going in, how much is coming out. Can you talk to us a little bit about what your opinion or mindset is on why people aren't taught this stuff in school? And then also what's a good step one? If you're in this situation, regardless of whether you're making a lot of money or a little bit of money, what would you say is your first step? Is it beginning to track your money, or is there something else you need to get in order first?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, like, even in school, like when I was taught to track my money, now this is back in the 90s, right? The early to mid 90s when I was in high school. They're teach you to track your money. It was like all on a check register, which
Sure.
nobody uses anymore, right? Like, that's just, it was hard. I was a great student, and it was even kind of confusing thing for me. Well, I think that's what it is. It's just confusing. And most teachers, of course, in the education system, they don't know how to do it themselves. They're all broke, just trying to make ends meet. They're just trying to live their life. So I think that's a big reason. Like, they always have that perspective. They tell you, hey, pack away your 401ks, or in their case, the 403bs,
Mm.
and just set it and forget it. That's their basic way of living. And that's not a way to become financially free. In fact, it's impossible to become free living that kind of life. You've got to switch it up. That's why we need alternative investments like what you guys have, right? But I'll tell you, like, it's just not taught because people don't know it. And so it's like the blind leading the blind.
Mm.
And even people do teach it. Like, I've seen a lot of financial people out there trying to teach this stuff. They sound like freaking accountants, right? Like, this make it so complex sounding that it seems like you got to be some sort of brilliant genius to figure it out. And you really don't. And so, Brian, like you said, like, that first step is really just tracking your money. Don't even worry about budgets, right? Budgets are useless if you don't know what's coming in and going out. And so that's a step one. Budget's like a step two, but step one is to start tracking it, like really see what's going on. And I guarantee you, already just by tracking it, you'll find money to free up. Because I had one lady that she was making $250,000 a year between her and her husband, right? And this is like 10 years ago. So that would be, that was a better lifestyle than today. $250,000 a year barely buys you hardly anything. But with her, I mean, there were $250,000 a year, but what I found was eating out budget was, or not budget, but what they were spending was $5,600 a month just eating out.
Wow.
And I was like, how is that even possible? Like, are you eating steak for breakfast? And she's like, kind of, yeah, we kind of are. We're eating out all the time. And so, just I said, hey, let's just get that cut back. Once we realized the truth, then it was time to start creating a budget. We said, all right, let's cut it back to, quote unquote, only $1,000 a month of eating out, right? It's like, you don't have to rip the Band-Aid off. You don't have to be like Dave Ramsey people, which is totally taught out of scarcity, right? It's like, hey, just bring it down to $1,000 a month. Start eating at home a little bit more often, right? And she did. And it's funny because she found out that, at home, they're spending money at food at home as well, because the daughter's live-in boyfriend wanted to be a professional chef, was buying all this crap and blowing money on groceries. So she cut back on him like $400 a month. And next thing you know, she's like seriously freeing up $5,000 a month just in food. And then she went crazy. Then I had to slow her down, because then she was like getting hooked on like finding this money. But that's the cool thing, is that just by tracking it, she didn't have to create a budget. She just had to start tracking to find where these money leaks were. And so you start there, you'll start finding stuff, and then you can go to creating. I don't like to call it a budget. I like to call it a spending plan, because your money's got to have a job, right? Every dollar should have a job, even if it's going to savings or if it's going to an investment account, whatever it might be. Give your money a job so that it's got places for it to go.
Yeah, that's a great tips. And I think in maybe agree with this. A lot of this starts with getting comfortable looking at yourself in the mirror. I feel like
Mhm.
money is a very uncomfortable topic for a lot of
Yeah.
people. And I'm pretty sure you get that. Like maybe you get the initial emails or you get the phone call, and you sort of have to like massage the relationship to get people to kind of open up and admit in a sort of way, like, I make $250,000 a year. But if I'm spending over $5,000 a month, that's $60,000 a year. Almost 30% of my income goes to food, consumables, things that I eat, and then it's just gone, right? It's not actually making me any money. So I think what you're doing is really powerful just for people in general, because we want our next generation, right? Our kids, our future, to get more comfortable talking about money, not to brag or say like I have this much and you have that much, but just the idea of spreading that financial literacy, that knowledge is I think one of our jobs as young entrepreneurs and as just business professionals.
Mm-hmm. It is. It really is. I mean, it's awesome to do it. I think you don't have to go overboard with it, right? It's just about, really just enjoying it wherever you are. And that's why I talk about those three perspectives of money, because if you're more on the spender side, like she was, well, great. You need to bring in a little bit more of the saver type habits to swing the pendulum back in the middle of steward, right? So think of spender and saver on the opposite sides of the scarcity spectrum. Where right in the middle is the steward, because the steward is kind of a blend of the spender and saver put together. So if you're more of a saver, like you're more hoarding your money and stuff, you might need to swing more to becoming a spender. It doesn't mean you're below money, but it does mean that you need to release the grip on your money to get it working for you. And that's what I get mostly is I get more people now saying, all right, I've been really good. I am like the poster child for Dave Ramsey, who said I was going to become financially free when I became debt free. And I'm not. Like I'm just as broke as I ever was. I still have to keep working. How do I get out of this rat race? And that's where we have to swing the pendulum back from those savers to being that steward of, all right, let's get this money actually working for you instead of you always working for that money.
Chris, you had a phrase a minute ago that I absolutely love it. You said every dollar should have a job. And I love the way that's worded, because that is such a powerful message. And I hope that resonates really well. And as you were talking, there's a few things that kind of resonated with me. And we have this line that I forget who it is in our industry that is a really, really prominent asset manager. And, and his comment is like, look, if you can't track it, you can't manage it. Right. And this applies to your personal finances as well. Right. If, like you said, if you don't know where the money's coming in, where's it going out? How do you know what your financial stability is? You don't. Right. So, and then the second thing is, for us as entrepreneurs, we had another guest on the show that mentioned this. You have to manage your personal finances like you do your business, right? You have to understand that cash flow. But if you don't have your personal finances in order, you're not going to have your business finances in order, and as you're going through this, all those lessons are kind of resonating with me, because this is exactly what, you're alluding to, right? Is you're actually teaching people how to operate their finances, their personal finances, in a way, kind of like a business, right? Where every dollar, is where it's going and you're putting it to work. And I think it's a great message. And I think for some people, it feels so overwhelming at first, because it's like, it completely changes everything, right? We're just not naturally taught to look at our finances this way, but it's not as cumbersome as the people think. And like you said, that you use that one example, is like, once you start seeing it and you start seeing the power of tracking it and cash flow starts freeing up, then it's just, people get excited, right? Then they see like, oh man, I can do this and I can replicate it,
Yeah, it's true. I mean, so many, if I agree. I mean, if more people thought of their personal finances like their business finances, if they did it the same way, life would become so much easier. What's interesting is that the personal financial world, like the Dave Ramseys and the Susie Ormans of the world, right? They're telling you to actually do the opposite of how we've taught to do business finances. And the truth is, the way you run business finances is exactly how you should do personal. If you did it that way, everything would become easier. Wealth is actually more possible. But here's the problem, is that with the personal financial realm, right, we've got banks and other financial institutions that want you to stay ignorant and broke. I mean, to put it bluntly, right? They want you to use them. Think about it like a bank. Banks tell you to save everything, spend nothing, save it forever, take out as little money as possible when you get to retirement, right? Live on less than the interest. And then, of course, take as much risk as possible. They'd say, take high risk, create high returns. Hey, in business, if you took high risk, create high returns, you would lose. You would be a gambler and you would be out of business, right? I mean, when we're in business, we take calculated risk. We want to minimize that risk as low as possible to get the max ROI, right? That's the way it should be in personal finances. Not, hey, I'm going to take these high risks, put it in stupid stocks I have no control over. I can't do anything to manage my risk at all. And I'm just going to try to make some money. But the truth is, a 90% chance of losing or 90% chance of risk is still a 90% chance of losing. It's a 10% chance of winning, right? We want that chance to be as high as possible. We want as little risk as possible, create as max return as possible. And I think that's the difference, that people are taught these things. They're taught to pay off their debt as quickly as possible, right? Well, of course, the banks want you to get their money back, just like any of us as investors. If we got people, that we're lending money out to, or vice versa, they're lending us money. We want to try to get that money back, right? We want to get our investment back when we lend people money. So it's the same thing with banks. They're just investors trying to teach you that somehow that is, conventional wisdom, right? That you just pay off all your debt. But the truth is, if you did like a business, right? If you're looking at business finances, you would say, hey, if I get a loan, like I remember my first SBA loan as a business owner, right? It was $25,000 line of credit. I cashed it all out to put into my business. I was paying $130 a month. Now, if I can't turn 25 grand into 130 bucks a month, I shouldn't be in business, right? Well, what's the difference between that and personal finances? If you take out $25,000 on a line of credit, you're looked at as like this horrible sinner, like, oh, you just did the worst thing. But I'm like, well, wait, if that only cost me 130 bucks a month with 25 grand, can I turn around and make 250 or 500 bucks a month with that money, right? And that's the real question. If you can't, then yeah, don't do it. Like you should only be borrowing money to go and invest if especially with lower risk, that you can go and create a higher return, and now, like, I mean, think about it right now. Like, my biggest thing I'm seeing as a problem, right, for most people that are, especially the ones that are savers, is that their money's locked up in prison, right? They've got their money locked up in their IRAs and their 401ks or in some brokerage accounts, thinking that they got to let it sit there forever until they're 60,000 years old. You've got their money trapped in equity with a really big appreciating real estate market right now. Like, money is just trapped in equity in their house, paying them nothing. They got money sitting in savings because they're not even sure what to do with the money in savings, right? Like, they got their money just locked up, sitting there doing nothing. And so my big job now, especially with most people I'm working with, has been, hey, how do we get your money out of prison? How do we get it out of there? How do we get it out of those retirement accounts that aren't serving you, that you're taking these high risks to get crappy, mediocre returns? Because the stock market's only averaged 8% for the last 60 million years, right? So why are we trying to put money there when we can make much better in like real estate, and take less risk with real estate too? You can actually have a real asset, not some arbitrary stock that's based on whatever whim somebody thinks it's worth that day, or even worse, they're throwing into Bitcoin, and they're thinking like, oh yeah, like just throw it into Bitcoin because it's not like it could drop 10%, 20% in a day. You're like, come on, like it's ridiculous what people are doing with their money right now. It's like, we can get this doing some cool stuff, making some great money, getting out of prison. I have a guy down in San Diego right now. He's got like, of course, when I get people on the West Coast and they got real estate there, I'm like, I already know that you should be selling your property or properties, right? Because if it's on the West Coast, you probably got this really low return on equity, right? So I'm like, get that money out, and this one guy, he's like, well, my goal is the next 6 years to, take all this extra money, pay off my debt. I should pay off both my house and this investment property in California in 6 years. I'm like, well, great. What does that free up? $4,500 a month. Then I look at it. I'm like, well, your property's got 600,000 of equity in it, the real estate investment property, right? His house has got like 500,000 of equity in it. I'm like, come on, man. Like we can get unlocked. If we sell your investment property and then do a cash out refinance only up to 80% on your house, we would actually be able to free up about 800 grand or so that could actually create at least 70, well, probably at least 80,000 a year off of, right? And I'm like, if you do that, I mean, even there's a little bit higher cost in his mortgage payment, a little bit, it wasn't a lot actually, surprisingly, he actually still nets out $70,000 a year by passively investing with that money, which is more than the $4,500 a month he's trying to do in 6 years. And if he keeps reinvesting that 70,000 or so a year, and that keeps building up each year, it's like, I call it income snowball, right? Because you now reinvest it. Now it's like 75,000 a year, you can reinvest the next year and so on. He's going to be up over 100,000 a year by the time he was hoping to free up 4,500 a month. Like that's the kind of stuff that is so fun, because when you see it, it's like you got this locked up potential that could be doing some magic for you right now. But because of all the world telling you that it should be this way, which by the way, all the world is broke. Why are we listening to them? Again, it's blind leading the blind. Don't listen to them. Listen to people that are actually free that say, hey, I can see it. It's right there. Do that.
Boom. I can almost stop the show right there, Brian, and be like, bam.
No, Chris, I think you're right too. I mean, companies and jobs, we've made it so easy to, right? It's like, go to work, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, 9 to 5, get a little cut of your check, put it in this 401k account, whatever you're doing. Maybe you've got a self-directed IRA or a mutual fund or something, right? And it's just do that for 35 years or whatever, and you're good. Like, it's going to be a shock to a lot of people to realize that that's, there are people that are not going to do that and going to get much more superior returns. And I agree with your point earlier about, you were talking about different income streams. That's really the name of the game. In my opinion, I think being flexible in today's market, you can't apply this umbrella strategy that everybody should be taking, putting in their money in a 401k, and this is going to guarantee success and allow you to retire in 30, 35 years. There's so many different ways to invest your money. The market is constantly changing, whether you're investing in stocks or real estate, you got to have different strategies. And it's also just so much more fun, in my opinion, like to find these different alternative solutions and adapt when the market's changing. And I don't know, I guess for some people, maybe they see that as a lot of work, but I think when you have a paradigm shift and you really start to look at it in a different way, it can actually be a lot of fun to find out, like, okay, well, last year I was getting 7%. How can I get 10 this year? And then, or how can I get 12, or how can I get 13? And you really start to realize, like, there are those opportunities out there, but you do have to be looking for them.
That's right. The world's there, right? I mean, so many people say, well, like, it seems like everybody's doing this. I'm like, well, that's because there's so much marketing and billions of dollars of marketing being thrown at you to go do the typical Fidelity, Vanguard type of crap, like that stuff. I can tell you, I was that financial advisor, right? I ran the numbers. When I ran real market numbers and real inflation numbers, it was depressing. It was like, whoa, you got to save way more than 10 or 20%. Like they were telling us, even back in the day, if you save 10% of your income, you'll be able to retire at age 65. That's bull. And now they're saying, and then of course, later on, they finally said, oh, it's actually 20%. We found out that number was too small. Duh. But I'm like, no, even back then I was like 20% still too little. And I guarantee in the future, they'll say, yeah, 20% probably wasn't enough because we're seeing that people aren't retiring, now the baby boomers are starting to hit that point, right? I'm telling you, like, there's so much of a bigger world out there, and there's millions of us that have been investing in real estate that already know this. It's not like we're like the few, the proud, like there's only a couple of us out there. There's literally millions of Americans doing this, getting rich. But again, most of us are just doing it ourselves, right? We're not out there, spending billions of dollars trying to market to you. We're just telling you, hey, this is what we're doing, and we're happy. Our family's happy. We have freedom, and we're going to enjoy that freedom. We're not that self-interested. Now, granted, if you're raising money because you're an operator and you're doing capital, yeah, you do a little bit, but even then, the government tells you can't save that much. So it's like, well, that's stupid. Like they're trying to almost purposely shut us up for something that actually is good. So my advice to people is yeah, it's a different kind of education, but it's not hard. You could be a passive investor and literally become free. And I'm seeing people do it all the time, as we find, doesn't matter if you're in syndications, you're working with the operator there, you're buying your own properties, doing turnkey real estate, or whatever you're doing, again, where you're hands off, or you're in a fund, where there's lending and things like that going on. Whatever it is, there's way better returns with more managed risk doing alternative investments than it is doing the mainstream stuff, the Main Street stuff that hasn't worked. Right? Stay away from Wall Street. That's all high risk to create low mediocre returns. You want lower risk to create much higher returns to actually give you some sort of hope and freedom now, not down the road when you might be too old to enjoy it.
I was going to make that same exact point there, Chris. I'm so glad you said that, because that's what I really want people to really think about is you only live one life. You only have a limited amount of time on this earth, right? And why not enjoy it now when you're vibrant, you're young, you have such a big runway ahead of you? Why wait till you're 65, 70 to retire, like you said, on a fraction of the income that you had been making your entire career? And oh, by the way, now health elements start coming. Now you start having to deal with health problems, and so you're limited in your capacity. And look, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of young 65, 70-year-olds out there that are living a great life. I'm not saying that, but the point being is, like, man, take life by the horns now and go enjoy it now. And if you think about in our time today, $1,000 a month in cash flow can change many households. Just freeing up $1,000 a month in cash flow can afford people a lot of opportunity that they don't have now. So just it's constantly thinking about that. And you said this earlier, the system is purposefully, intentfully designed to keep people in this one lane. They want
Yep.
you to stay in the consumer mindset. It's, but here's the beautiful thing is that anybody can play by the game. Anybody can play by the rules. It's just a matter of which rules you want to play by, And
Yep.
so, this education's out there. People like you are out there giving this value. I encourage anybody to go find it and just, break the shackles off, so to speak. We've had another guest say that, but, just take the blinders off and really just go find your financial freedom. You can do it. It's at your fingertips. You just got to go find it. So, Chris, we're getting near the end, but I want to give you a few minutes to talk about your show and your website, Money Ripples. Tell us a little bit more about the podcast and those resources you have out there to the public.
Yeah, you bet. So we got my podcast show called, it's a hard one to remember. It's called The Chris Miles Money Show, right? Took days and days of trying to figure out on the name. And that's what I came up with. That's how brilliant I am. And sadly, I didn't even come up with the name. I actually had followers that came up with the name for me. I was trying to create something cute with like cash flow or something like that. And we're like, just call it The Chris Miles Money Show. So The Chris Miles Money Show is the podcast. Website's moneyripples.com. There's great resources on there too. And I'll just close with this. Like there's hope, like if I'm a guy that again had to do it twice, right? And I had to dig out of $1 million plus debt hole to get to the point where I could finally become financially independent. Guys, a lot of people I'm talking to are in a way better, healthier financial position than I was in, right? And I'm just telling you that there is hope and you can enjoy life now. You can actually enjoy it while your family is growing up. You can teach them something different, like you got kids, how important it is to not teach them the same old scarcity mongering crap that's out there today where there really is no hope. It's a survival world. You want to teach them to thrive. And this is the perfect opportunity to do it right now.
Yeah. Amen to that, man. I appreciate that. So,
Love it.
Well, Chris, before we go, man, we got a few more questions for you and then we'll kind of wrap up from there. So, one thing that we love to ask all of our guests is what do you like to do for your continued education to further your investing?
Yeah, I love masterminding. Like that was something I was always against until the last few years. I realized that some of the best education I've gotten is being around multiple people with all kinds of different backgrounds and different experiences, and be able to learn from them, right? And podcasts are a great way to do that because podcasts is kind of like your own way to mastermind from home, right? It's like a way to say, I can get different perspectives on the same angle and figure this stuff out. So podcasts have always been great for me, but masterminds, like there's a specific problem I have. Great. Is there somebody I know that's solved that problem, that's overcome that challenge and learn from them? So that's one thing I love doing now.
Awesome. What have been some of the lasting lessons you've learned along your way?
Which one? Right.
Pick the top one or two.
Yeah. Obviously I've mentioned several, right? But I think really it comes down to is that everything comes in business, we would call it profit, right? Is like, how much profit do you have? How much left over do you have each and every month? Personal life, same thing is what's your profit, right? That's what I call is cash flow. What is that left over? The more you've got of it, the more freedom you have. It doesn't matter how much is sitting in the bank. What really matters is how much more is my income than my expenses. And that difference in there, that buffer, that's where freedom happens. Because when you have that kind of freedom, there's more options, and options are what really create freedom. And I'll tell you, going along with that, the one thing I wish I would have done, like during the last recession, I'm seeing people do again, is I wish I would have gone for boring. I found out that now boring is sexy, right? Everybody always tells you like, hey, like go for that home run. Like, when somebody talks about doing a flip and they make 50,000 or 120,000 or whatever it might be, it sounds so sexy. But now to me, sexy is like, hey, I just bought a rental. That door makes me $300 a month. Like, it doesn't sound awesome from a marketing perspective, but the thing I did wrong is that I started gambling with my real estate where I was trying to bank on appreciation. And when I banked on appreciation, that's when you start losing. Because if anything shifts or changes, especially if it was negative cash flow, which is what I did on some of those properties, now you're in the hole and you don't have any equity, right? So the best thing to do is focus on that cash flow, focus on that profit. That is where your real freedom comes from.
That would be an awesome topic for a whole nother podcast episode. That point you just made right there, banking on appreciation, that would be a good one. So anyway, stay on track here. What advice would you give to the listeners to help them grow their businesses?
The best thing you do to grow your business is focus. There's a great book I read called The Pumpkin Plan by Mike Michalowicz. If you've heard of Profit First, he writes that book as well. The Pumpkin Plan talks about or the prize winning pumpkins, the huge ones you see on the news, right? They actually happen because they buy these specific seeds from like Nova Scotia. They plant them. It could cost them like $100,000 for these seeds, right? They plant them. And then as the vine grows, there's multiple pumpkins. They start chopping off the smallest pumpkins. And then eventually you're left with just one big pumpkin on that with that whole vine feeding it, right? Your business should be the same way, is how can you chop off all the distractions, all the things that don't make you a lot of money or they take up a lot of time, but the ROI is low. Go for the best ROI possible in your business. What's those best ROI activities? The ones that you actually make you happy, like those kind of things. You do those things and you'll find out that you'll make way more profit, way more money with less time. And that's one thing I did in my business that shifted everything, is I went from working overtime hours to working part-time while making more profit. And you do that, oh man, life is like a completely different game for you.
Love that. Appreciate that, Chris. All right, man. Tell listeners how they can get a hold of you, learn more about Money Ripples, and get connected with you.
Yeah. Best way to connect, besides listen to the podcast, is just go to moneyripples.com. You can actually reach out there and ask any questions you've got.
Awesome. Well, Chris, want to thank you so much for tuning in. Great conversation, and look forward to staying connected.
It's been such a pleasure, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.